Hey, it's Zach. Wanted to remind you to check out Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective, friends of the program, twice a week. Windy and his cohorts bring you insight and analysis on the latest in the NBA. On the most recent episode, Windy, Kevin Pelton, nerd, and Mike Schmitz, less nerdy, discuss the young stars of the NBA's bubble and whether or not their careers match the expectations that surrounded them coming into the league. You can find the Hoop Collective wherever you get your podcasts.
And now, the Lowe Post.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Lowe Post podcast where it is July and it is the nighttime, almost. And once a year, when those things are true, two very special people and I get together and have drinks and talk about basketball. One of them is Howard Beck of Bleacher Report, and the other is current bubble resident Rachel Nichols of ESPN. We obviously do this in Las Vegas. Last year we did it at a off the beaten path, I'll say politely, tiki bar. And we're not going to be able to do that this year. There is no Las Vegas. There is no in-person anything. But we can still drink and we can still do a podcast. So, Mr. Beck, how are you?
What's going on, Zach? I'm doing well. But I feel like I need to inaugurate this the right way here. Hang on.
Yeah.
Mine's already
All
open.
right, there we go. That was courtesy of Svendale here in Carroll Gardens, the Born Too Loose Lager. Cheers. Rich, Zach. Great to see you.
That is so on brand, Howard. I can't even begin. What up, Beck? What up, Zach? I'm going classy with my glass of wine here. We all see each other. I know the people out there are listening to us. We all see each other on a visual here, a Zoom kind of squadcast thing that we're doing. So I'm here to make sure that Zach and Howard really are still drinking.
No, my can is ambiguously orange. It is Treehouse Brewery Brewing Company IPA that one of my buddies, Ed, he just wants to be credited as Ed. He does not want his last name associated with anything that's going to happen on this podcast. He should also be called Ed. Gave me as a housewarming gift. It's delicious, and we're drinking it. So, Rachel, I have to start. You're in the bubble.
I am.
Howard and I are not in the bubble. A couple of questions. Forgive me if you have covered this already. I haven't been able to watch everything. Does your room have a balcony?
No. So that meant that when we did our initial 7-day quarantine, when we got here, we were not allowed outdoors at all. No balcony, no walking outside, no going outside even to get tested, which some people a little earlier in the process had done. So 7 days in a hotel room, no outdoors in any way.
Second question, do you have a restaurant item named for you at any establishment that you want to alert us to right now?
I do not, and so therefore I don't have to say if it's a strip club or not. There just isn't one. So there you go.
It's a gentleman's club.
Is it though? Is it, Zach?
I just had to explain this whole thing to my 14-year-old daughter, and had to explain that we call them gentlemen's clubs. I don't know why we do.
Why?
We do.
Look,
the name should
guys,
go. The name should go with the people doing the thing, right? Those women are working. You don't get credit for watching.
No, Stop now. Let's move right along. Rachel.
Zach hasn't had enough beer for this conversation yet, Howard.
I'm not even touching any part of this conversation, even though I kicked it off. Rachel, have you either gone fishing or played cornhole yet?
I have played cornhole, or bags, as some people here call it. I have found out that there is like serious regional dialect on cornhole, which I had no idea. Some people call it corn toss. Some people call it bags. There have been arguments over this. I have not yet got to go fishing. They just moved fishing poles and bikes over to the media side of our little village here in the last day or so. So I'm looking forward to maybe in the next week getting to go fishing. I'm a little suspicious that there is only one fish in this entire lake and that every NBA player has caught it and thrown it back. So I will have to see if another player, like if any of the players are using the fish when I go fishing, or if when I go fishing, I will have access to the one fish that I believe everyone is catching. I will find out.
I just assumed that they just dumped like a truckload of fish in there so that everybody can be a winner.
Everybody, we'll find out. I'll find out. I'll report back to you guys at the end of the week.
When you go fishing, do you have to pay Tillman Fertitta for the fish or the fishing equipment, or is that not part of his deal?
It's funny because he, of course, was the supplier of the off-campus restaurant deliveries at the very beginning. Shockingly, all 6 or 7 choices were Tillman Fertitta restaurants, and the players, and I give them a lot of credit for this. And one of the many things that they have said that is important to them is that the NBA do more business with Black-owned businesses. And one of the, I hope that it happens in a dozen different areas, but one of them was making sure that Black-owned businesses and restaurants were added into the bubble selection for delivery. So that did happen. And I thought that was a cool, it's small, right? These little changes, there's much bigger changes that are much more important. But every little step counts, and it's happening in other areas of NBA operations. And it was nice for the players to be able to see something happen so quickly on that front.
Last one, you just did a segment for today playing Uno with the Antetokounmpo brothers. You didn't appear to be the strongest of the 4 Uno players in the way that segment was edited.
Hustled. I got completely hustled. So Costas, the youngest brother of the 3 who are here in the bubble, had Uno. He had 1 card left, and I was the one who had to make the next play. And I was about to put down a card of a blue color because I was 100% sure that the card in his hand was not blue. And Thanasis on the other side of the table was like, don't do that. He's trying to trick you. He actually has a blue card in his hand. And I was like, come on. I know what I'm doing. I'm putting down blue. And Thanasis was like, no, I swear I'm his brother. I'm telling you, he's trying to trick you. Believe me. And so I believed him. And it was a total, I just got hustled. I let myself get hustled by 3 professional athletes.
Sad day. Real athletes and real Uno players, they don't go looking for people to blame when things don't go their way. They take it upon their shoulders to admit when it's
accept
their fault.
Responsibility. Look,
I want to know if any
I'm flat out admitting though that I let myself get hustled by the boys there, and they were a lot of fun. And I will.
Did you win any games?
Much. I did. I don't plug much, right, when I come on your pod or anything, but I will say if you guys want to look online for that piece, it was really fascinating for me to watch them interact with each other, to have these kids who grew up in a 206 people living in a 250 square apartment in Greece. The fact that 3 of these boys are in the NBA and potentially going to play each other, as they said, knock on wood, if things go well for them, they would like to play each other in the NBA finals. And it's just even being in the bubble. Let's say neither team gets that far, but just being here, it really is incredible to hear them talk about their upbringing and their journey here. And then the competitiveness between them is, of course, legendary. And I saw a lot of it in Uno. But they say that they play so hard when they play each other because neither one of them wants to let the other down in saying they didn't set a good enough example for the younger one coming next up. So I thought the whole thing was really interesting. I felt fortunate to be able to do it. And I got hustled.
Well, I thought it was just interesting to hear that Giannis is it's obvious maybe, but to hear him say out loud, I'm kind of rooting for the Lakers to make the finals. Mm-hmm. Like I have a rooting interest in what's going on in the opposite conference. You might not necessarily expect him to verbalize that. Well, I hope there's a 45-minute, unedited,
it's pretty great
version of this because I really would like to evaluate. Yeah, I want to evaluate your Uno skills, Mr. Beck. What is your question?
No, I just have one question. In the spirit of the day, was there any Uzo involved in this? They came from Greece playing cards. That would make it interesting.
We are the only ones drinking here, Beck. They did not drink. They're right. They're finely tuned professional athletes. We're the sloths.
Fair point.
All right. Well, I have a lot more bubble curiosity, but we'll throw that at you when
I have a bubble question for you guys. So, do either of you, now that you're seeing the bubble in action, either want to come down here or wish you would come down here? There are in dates and out dates. Good seats are still available in the bubble. I'm just asking.
I am not. I'm not tempted. I've admitted to having a little bit of bubble FOMO.
That's a thing?
Because it's weird. If that's a thing. Because there aren't that many major NBA events that I would miss, right? Summer League, I go. G League Showcase, every other year, I go. I have not missed an All-Star game in a very long time. I have not missed, we don't go to every round of the playoffs, but I'm normally somewhere. So not being there at all, this is a unique and bizarre and an intriguing, amazing, compelling moment in the NBA. So to not be there, I have a little bit of that kind of FOMO, not so much about the bubble, but just like this whole unique thing, and knowing that the playoffs are coming and that I won't be there for any round of the playoffs. I have still held out the possibility, I've talked about this, that maybe I would do the group 2 thing, which is the go down outside the bubble, stay where you want, set your own schedule, but you can only go to games and no practices. You cannot go in press conferences. And your seats at the games would be higher up. That is an option for the media as this thing progresses. And I've left out the possibility that maybe I would do that for the finals to keep my finals streak alive. And basically because I even without any access, being there to see the first ever NBA finals with no fans in a bubble in this weird environment, that's too much FOMO for me at that point. Like that's I would have reached like max FOMO, and I will cave and drive down to Orlando because I'm not getting on a freaking plane. And yeah, that's the way I look at it right now. But Rach, like having seen what you have gone through, Stein, Mark Spears, all my friends who were down there, it does not sound like the most enjoyable, especially that first 7 days of quarantine for sure. And like the payoff, I know you guys are able to get some access, but it does feel like it's so inhibited that I don't know that it would be that it would feel like the best experience as a reporter. So
what makes me feel most alive as on the job is like the post game beer with the coach, or the pregame coffee with the agent, or the sideline chit chat before the game with the assistant coaches or a player or whatever. And it doesn't seem like that's possible at all, even for the tier 1 people. And tier 1, I think, would be closed off to me if I went late anyway, and I'd be in the tier that Howard described. So I have a little bit. I've also left open the possibility of zooming in for the finals for tier 2, but for various reasons in my personal life, it's not a good time for me to go. I will say I've had this like knot of anxiety inside me in the past 4 or 5 days that I haven't been able to pinpoint why that is. And I think part of it is, oh, wow, we've had 4 months of this and it's ending soon and the games are starting. And I feel like displaced in a lot of different ways. And part of it is not being there. But I don't share Howard's level of bubble FOMO. There's part of me that would like to go to the finals, but it doesn't seem like a good situation for me. But I wish you luck. Or I mean, you must miss your kids desperately.
Absolutely.
Your husband, forget it. Who cares? But your kids,
no.
Of course.
All 3 daily FaceTimes help, and I will be ducking in and out, and that will help to be able to see them in the middle, which is really important to me as well. And it's true for the players too. I mean, it's funny. I have had more conversations. I've told my children this. I have young twin girls, and I have told them that I've had more conversations about them with NBA players in the last week than I have probably in the entire time they've been alive, because it is top of mind for every player down here. I think that players are used, and coaches and staff members are used to being away from their kids and family. This is a job where you travel, and most families who sign up for this life, everybody knows the deal. But you come back in between series. You come back in between games or nights or things like that. And the idea that some of the guys who are here, if things go well, I was talking to Frank Vogel about this. I mean, he's sitting there saying goodbye to his family, saying, I hope I don't see you for 3.5 months. I mean, that's sort of the position they're in, which is really strange. And they're sort of feeling their way through it too. That's not an experience, even in a job where you travel a lot and you get paid, they get paid an extraordinary amount of money, and they certainly are not complaining about it, but that doesn't mean you don't miss your kids. And so they have wanted to talk about that and my kids and my experience and all of that more than I have ever experienced before covering the NBA. And I think it's very present for everybody who's here, and that's what players and coaches want to talk about a lot of the time.
Who's responsible for top of mind becoming something that I now hear every single day? How did this happen? I don't think I ever heard this until like 6 months ago. Now everything is top of mind. To your point, a common refrain I've heard from people all over the league is, and again, the feeling of like weird displacement or weirdness everyone feels inside is like, this is what you hear from players, coaches, etc. is like, we just went through 4 straight months of being with our families.
Yes.
Which never happens.
Yep.
That's the most family time I've had in my professional life.
Yep.
To cold turkey for X amount of time. It's just this one extreme to another extreme, both of which are unfamiliar, that is kind of, it's messing with people's minds. Well, look, as we have seen with Major League Baseball today, this is pretty much the only way to try to operate a sports league right now. So there are costs
in the
and
United
benefits.
States.
In the United States, there are costs and benefits to everything, and everyone has to make their own calculation. Let's bounce around some topics. Number one, our awards ballots are due in 24-ish hours. I'm done. I have made all my decisions. Let's start with you, Howard. What were one or two of the hardest ballot decisions for you to make?
Yeah, so mine is pretty much done, but in keeping with my tradition of torturing Mark Broussard in NBA PR, I probably won't send it until 11:58 tomorrow night, because I'm like always one of the last, if not the last, to send in. I just feel like that's a tradition I should uphold at this point. But I think I'm done. Maybe you'll talk me out of something along the way here. I struggled this year with how to weigh the, dominant offensive stats versus how much do we weigh defense versus how many games are the minimum, because we also have a weird number of games this year. I've got Lillard on the All-NBA teams, but not Bradley Beal. Their teams' records aren't dramatically different. Is that fair to Bradley Beal?
Yes.
Okay, so, those are the conceptually, those are the things I struggled with. I will say something that I flip-flopped on 17 times before I finally just said screw it. I left Zion Williamson off the Rookie of the Year ballot. And I know, Zach, you did too, because I saw your column. And I really struggled with it because, as Rachel knows from our Joel Embiid debates of a few years back, Ja Morant to me was automatic as number one. That was easy. And then Zion's explosiveness, his incredibleness, the Zionness of Zion, it is hard to deny. But 19 games when Kendrick Nunn had a really great rookie season as a starter on an important team in the East that has a chance to do some things. When Brandon Clark had a really phenomenal season, Memphis. Now, are either of them as good as Zion? No. But as I've often said, as Rachel may remember, it's Rookie of the Year. It's a year.
Right. But first of all, it wasn't this year. So that's important to remember. Zion didn't play 19. Right. Well, I mean, it is actually a thing, though, right? By the way, I just want to note, Zach, that your producer, Dan, is drinking with us on this pod. So even though he doesn't have to speak, he's got what do you got there, Dan? Do you have a blue light?
He's kind of drinking. It's kind of drinking.
It's a light beer.
It's a Labatt's blue light beer. It's like,
It's like half drinking. Look, first of all, it is kind of, when you say 19 games so dismissively, Howard Beck, it's not 19 out of 82, right? It's 19 out of, I don't know exactly what the Pelicans end up at, 64 or something like that, right? So that is different. That's like roughly a third, a little bit less than a third. My argument with you on Joel Embiid is going to be the same argument here. And by the way, I picked Ja Morant for Rookie of the Year. I don't think it's close. The question, though, is Zion on your ballot anywhere else, right? That's what we're talking about right now. So is he on my ballot? When you compare him to some of those other names that you mentioned, and again, not Ja Morant, because Ja Morant is the Rookie of the Year, would you rather have Zion for roughly a third of the season versus those other guys for the portion of the season that they played? And when we had the Joel Embiid discussion, my point was, and by the way, love the NBA player that Malcolm Brogdon has turned into, so this is not a slight on him. But that year, when you looked at his numbers, if I was a coach and you said to me, would you rather have Malcolm Brogdon for this number of games or Joel Embiid for this number of games, I would have taken Joel Embiid for the shorter number of games. And I think once we get further down on the Rookie of the Year ballot, there's going to be a place on my ballot for Zion, because there will be a point where I will stop being able to say, no, I'd rather have the other guy for that number of games. Zion is such a game changer. And if it comes down to only having him for a third of the season compared to some of these other guys, not Ja Morant, but some of these other guys, I will stick him somewhere on that ballot.
Well, part of it is it depends what part of the season you're talking about, right? Like, if I think you would look at it differently if Zion played the first 19 games and then tore his ACL and was injured. There's a certain effect that comes with, like, oh, now he's healthy. He would have been playing the whole season. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I felt it would have been inconsistent for me to have him on my ballot So I took the same all or nothing approach that I took with Embiid, which is like, if I'm considering him, he is the best rookie. But it's just not enough games for me, so I didn't put him on. But like, I don't feel particularly. I do think Clark was really good, and Nunn started 62 games for like a good team. So I'm cool with those three on my Rookie of the Year ballot. Zion will make first team all rookie, obviously unanimously. Fine. Yes. I bet he doesn't care. I bet Zion doesn't really care about being second or third or whatever, or not on the ballot in rookie. He's not going to win, and he shouldn't win. And I don't think he should have won had the season gone on and he plays 37 games. And even if the Pelicans make the playoffs in that scenario, I don't think he supersedes Ja Morant, assuming Ja Morant keeps playing the way he's playing. I think Ja Morant is a really good Rookie of the Year by Rookie of the Year standards.
Yeah, if the 8 seeding games counted, I still don't think Zion had any chance of surpassing Ja. If the season itself had never been stopped, I still don't think he probably had any chance because there was only a month of games left. And I just don't think he was going to get to a threshold where you could say that it overwhelmed what Ja Morant had done. And to Rachel's point, and in defense of her arguments that I have attacked in the past, it is fundamentally different, right? Rachel's problem was that Brogdon on his own, as good as a player he's become, was not so outstanding as a rookie that you would say put him over Joel Embiid. And Ja Morant is outstanding. Not necessarily, you could flip a coin, Zion or Ja right now, about who you'd rather have going forward. So Ja is established the number one slot regardless. Zion wasn't going to pass him. I just feel like the whole season matters. And I think it cheapens something if we say, well, 19 games is enough when Kendrick Nunn played 62 and Brandon Clark played 50. And if we're going to put it in Rachel's terms of, well, who would a coach rather have? Well, if you knew going into the season you were only going to have 19 teams of Zion and it was going to result in you being potentially out of the playoffs, whereas Ja and Brandon Clark obviously are in the playoffs.
Right. Again, we're not talking about Ja, right? We're going to take him off of this discussion. When you're talking about, I'm sitting here having the Zion Kendrick Nunn debate right now because my ballot, like yours, Howard, not in yet. I have to look at the West a little differently from the East. And again, if you said to a coach, would you rather have Kendrick Nunn for 60 games or rather have Zion for 20? I'm sure you would get different answers, but you would get different answers. I don't believe that you would get Kendrick Nunn all the way across the board. I did want to ask you guys what you think about the fact that what you just mentioned, Howard, that the 8 seeding games don't count for these awards, but they do count for stats. What do you think of that decision?
I think it was a colossally stupid move by the NBA. Maybe even asinine. I like asinine, and I don't think I've used asinine recently. You can't tell me that the 8 games matter in the standings and are going to determine playoff positioning and possibly even if certain teams make the playoffs, and that these stats are going to count for all time in players' record books, and that all these other things matter, but it doesn't matter for the awards. And here's where it comes into play, and here's why it matters to me, and here's why it's been annoying me the last few days in particular as I've gone through the ballots. Chris Paul. Let's talk about Chris Paul. Chris Paul has had what I would call a really impactful season, not a statistically outstanding season that leaps off the page, but Chris Paul, the effect he's had on the Thunder, a team that a lot of people, most people I think, didn't even have in the playoffs. They're 5th in the West right now, and they are only a game out of 4th, and they're 2.5 out of 3rd. At the end of these 8 seeding games, what if they're 3rd? I think Chris Paul's definitely on my MVP ballot at that point. Not 1 or 2, and not even 3, but 4 or 5. As it stands right now with the MVP ballot that I've filled out but not sent, Chris Paul's not on it. And to me, as you guys know, MVP is always some combination of individual excellence, team success, and it's a sliding scale, and it's a feel thing. But it is the impact you have on your team and how you elevate that team, and Chris Paul has done that. And on that alone, I thought about putting him 5th. But I couldn't displace Damian Lillard because of Damian Lillard's overall individual excellence being so huge, even though the Blazers right now are on the outside looking in with the playoffs. But I do think that that scale would have tipped for me if Chris Paul and the Thunder leapt up to 3rd or 4th during these seeding games, but I don't even get the chance to make that decision now. And those are the kinds of things that, by the way, we do factor in a normal season in March and April when we get the ballots in early April. We're looking at the races and we're looking where teams end up as to how much to value a player's contributions. Because all NBA or MVP, it's not always just about the stats. It's about And what did that result in?
Did you get your team into the playoffs, which again, we'll never know. Just in terms of the discussion we were just having about Zion Williamson, right? Again, I am with you guys. I would not have knocked John Morant out of the Rookie of the Year spot no matter what happened with getting to the playoffs. But if Zion Williamson had been a big part of getting his team into that 8th spot and into the playoffs through these seeding games, through a playing game, through if the rest of the regular season had come through, that would change where he was on people's ballots, I would assume. So it's confusing that doesn't work that way. Zach, do you feel as strongly as Howard? Because Howard came in there.
I don't think I feel as strongly as Howard about anything as Howard does about this. I think
I'm only halfway through this Born Too Loose lager. Besides,
I think it's the wrong decision, but I also just haven't lost a lot of sleep over it. I think Chris Paul had an unbelievable season. I have Chris Paul on second team All NBA, and I think he's comfortably on second team All NBA. I think there's actually a gap between Chris Paul and guards 5 and 6, but I don't see any universe in which these 8 seeding games catapult Chris Paul onto my MVP ballot. And the top 6 or 7 are so good that I don't see any way that would have happened. I mean, there are some guys here or there that could have shifted the awards, and I do think it was the wrong decision, but it's not something I have lost a lot of sleep over.
This would be real quick. I should point out to the listeners that there will be a part 2, of course, of the Drunk with Power podcast on the 438. And I do have something remind me when we get to that about the MVP voting in general as an idea. But we'll bookmark that for later.
Rach, have you done your All NBA teams? And either way, what is an award that you have struggled with?
All right, so I have done my All NBA teams, but I have third team guard still open, and I wanted to actually ask you guys to start lobbying me on that.
Okay. Who are your first two? Who are your first 4?
Right. So
guards?
Look, one of my big issues with the NBA awards has just been that, and you guys have heard me go on about this ad nauseum, both on our podcasts where we talked about, as Howard says, drunk with power and things I would change as commissioner. We'll get to in our part 2. I just think that the NBA awards need some reform. If you look back at other leagues, they have sort of reformed and changed their awards more recently than the NBA has. The NBA has not. They've added a few things like, best teammate and things like that, but they've not significantly changed their awards in a couple decades. And I just think that with the advent of analytics and a bunch of other things, the NBA awards do need to shift a little bit. And one of them is MVP, which it sounds like we'll talk about later. But I do think that All NBA needs to be positionless. And it drives me crazy every year that it's not. It gets worse every year and harder. The only thing I will say about this year is that because the NBA really has become so positionless, is that there are players at least in more categories for us. Last year, it felt like some of the guys weren't getting credit for some of the games that they really had started at other positions. This year, I felt like the NBA did a better job of that. So I was able to construct the first team that I wanted to. I still think that it should be positionless, but I was able to put Anthony Davis at center, even though he hasn't played as much center, but at least that let me put Giannis at forward. I put Kawhi at the other forward spot. I know that is controversial. I put LeBron and James Harden at the guard spots.
We have the same first team, and I actually I applaud the NBA because they did get much more flexible this year. And by the way, they didn't do a good job of really publicizing this. I wouldn't even have checked if LeBron were eligible at guard. You have these drop down menus, and the player, you drop down from guard and the player is either there or not. I wouldn't even have checked if Fred Katz of The Athletic had not said, FYI, LeBron is eligible at guard. I wouldn't have checked. But then you have other things like Jokic is eligible at forward, which is just objectively ridiculous. He doesn't play forward. He never plays forward. It's stupid. But Drew Holiday is not eligible at forward. And Drew Holiday's not a forward. He's a guard. But I thought about ways to get him on my all-defense team, and that would have been one such way. Drew Holiday is more reasonable at forward than Nikola Jokic is. But overall, I think the NBA did a nice job. We had the same first team. Who were your second team guards, Rach? I bet we have the same
I was going to say, though, too, that in past years, you or I may have had some pause about putting a guy at a spot that he didn't really play. I think you and I have talked about this before, that ethically you want to put the guy at the spot he plays. But since I believe he should be positionless in the first place, I have no problem using my guard spot on LeBron James to get the starting five that I want.
LeBron plays whatever you want to call point guard.
Point guard, point forward,
LeBron plays that position.
Point person.
And he's been a point guard his entire career, by the way.
On offense. On defense, he does not really guard guards, although sometimes he does.
All right, so
but it's weird that we've decided to label him a point guard now when he's always been the guy with the ball in his hands. But
I'm not going to argue.
Second team, I agree with you on Chris Paul. So he and Damian Lillard are in my guard spots. I put Luka in my forward spot here. I know a lot of people have him on their first team. I put Pascal Siakam in the other forward spot and Jokic in my
Spicy
center spot.
P.
Yep.
You have Spicy P higher than I do.
I know.
I don't believe it.
Am I driving the bandwagon now? Is that happening?
I've let down Spicy P.
Well, it was an issue for me between him and Jason Tatum. That was my flip there, and I just felt like, well, the Raptors are higher than the Celtics in the standing at the point where the NBA has arbitrarily decided we're voting. So that's kind of part of what made the decision. But again, I haven't turned these in yet. So if you want to lobby me that they should be different, come on, give it to me. What do you think?
So we have the same two guards, Chris Paul and Damian Lillard, my second team All-NBA. Also Luka Doncic. You said Jokic at center, right? I did. Okay, so I have Jokic at center. My second team forward, the one that's missing, is neither of the ones that you mentioned. I have Jimmy Butler as second team forward. Now, we can debate that if you want, but I'm more interested. You're struggling with your third team guards.
Yes.
So I can tell you who I have right now as third team guards. One is Jason Tatum, who you just mentioned, and is eligible at both guard and forward. And the other is, and I'm shocked how little love this guy is getting for all NBA purposes. I have Ben Simmons as my sixth and final all NBA guard. So that means, I mean, you can go through the laundry list of guys. That means no Trae Young, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, Russell Westbrook, Donovan Mitchell, Kyle Lowry. Those are the six that whatever number I just named. Those were the ones that hurt. I have a whole column coming out tomorrow explaining my choices. I look at every stat. I watch all these guys a million times, obviously. I have a whole spreadsheet of advanced stats and a summation of where they rank in all of them and all of this. So I don't take that lightly, but I think Tatum is a pretty easy choice. He belongs on the All-NBA team somewhere. And I have Ben Simmons as the other one. So those are my two. Who are you? You're considering all those names, right? Where are you leaning?
So I put Tatum.
And Howard, where are you leaning?
Right. I put Tatum in the forward spot on my third team. Again, just in the idea that he's available there, and I believe that they shouldn't be positionless anyway. So I have Jimmy Butler in the guard spot on the third team. You could switch them forward and guard if somebody felt like it. Obviously, you know, they both play both. And then, I'm struggling with the other guard spot of Simmons, Beal, Lowry, Westbrook, who, you know, I know there's controversial in the heavy on stats community, but I do think that when he started playing more of the game that he plays, the Rockets sort of started the engine.
No question. Russell Westbrook, I am known as not as big a fan as consensus. I think that's fair, but he has a very strong case. And his last 22 or so games was phenomenal. Yep. So if you put him, to me, Simmons, and then the next three that I felt bad about were Westbrook, Booker, and Lowry. And then another tier down. Beal and Trae Young, I just can't. I'm sorry, I can't. Their teams were purposely bad. I think there's so to Howard's point earlier, talking about Damian Lillard at 29 and 37, there's a difference between the Blazers came in with actual expectations. Yes. Their games actually mattered. And then injuries ripped apart their roster from top to bottom almost. Versus the Hawks and the Wizards come in. The games don't matter. There are no expectations. And I'm sorry, but that and also 29 and 37 in the West is a different animal than 24 and 40 in the East. Or the Hawks, I think, are 20 and 47 in the East. So expectations and stakes, it just changes your day-to-day life in the NBA.
You average like 43 a game. I mean, come on.
No, but I think that people could have Wizards fans and Hawks fans will raise the gripe of, well, why does Damian Lillard get a pass for a team with a losing record? And I think there are varieties of losing record, and Devin Booker lives somewhere in between there, where his team is qualitatively worse than Portland, but does have some hopes and expectations and the fact that the games matter.
But on the flip side of this, Bradley Beal is now finishing. he already is going to be the highest scoring player in history to not make an All-Star team, and now probably not make an All-NBA team.
You might as well just add to it. Give him all the highest scoring player honors. Give him all the honors or dishonors or whatever. I love Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal's amazing. I had Bradley Beal on my podcast a couple months ago and apologized to him for not putting him on my All-Star team. He's amazing. I'm just saying for all NBA, which is the highest honor you can get, I am, if all things are equal, and you can say Ben Simmons 16 points a game versus Bradley Beal 30. How are they equal? I will shoot back to you 8 assists, 8 rebounds, all defense level defense versus whatever Bradley Beal has. So, and then I'm going like every game Ben Simmons plays actually matters. Every possession he plays on defense has actual consequences, and he plays like it. And those teams don't have actual consequences.
Every open jumper that Ben Simmons doesn't take has consequences.
Wow.
Listen, man, it's happening. He took 2 threes in a scrimmage. My Sixers are happening.
Let me just point out.
You got an asinine and a Ben Simmons jumper joke.
I made that joke purely for comedy purposes and just because he's on my third team at guard. So before the Ben Simmons fan club comes after me, he's on my All-NBA team at guard on the third team along with Chris Paul. But no, I do like.
Wait. Who's on your second team? Who's your second team guards if Chris Paul's not on second team?
Dame Lillard and Jimmy Butler.
Okay,
so that's fine. I can't.
This whole flexibility that the NBA gave us, and again, I'll add to you guys, kudos to the NBA for giving us much more flexibility in the positions as they should have. And it gave me the ability to put Anthony Davis at center on the first team, which I did. And so, my guards went Harden and Doncic on the first team, Lillard, Butler, Chris Paul, Ben Simmons. So I left off Westbrook, Beal, Lowry, the rest.
So you have Kawhi on second team?
I do at forward. Yeah.
See, that to me was more than anything else. That was the benefit of putting LeBron
at guard
on first team. At guard. And the casualty is Luka Doncic, and it's not fair. Luka Doncic had an unbelievable season. He would have been first team All-NBA had LeBron not been eligible at guard, and that sucks. He's unbelievable. I just think player for player, and I think Luka played 3 more games only than Kawhi.
I was going to say, Luka, I think it's 5 more games. But Luka, when you compare him to LeBron, Luka got hurt and LeBron didn't.
Well, I'm not talking about Luka and LeBron. Right. I'm talking about Luka and Kawhi.
I think he played. Was it 3 or 5? Something like that. It's small.
I think it's 54 to 51, and the minutes are about 150. Yep. And to me, that's not enough to make up for the fact that I just think Kobe's a better player.
And your column, Zach, reflected this your thinking, which is that, hey, listen, if you're going to start picking about games, Luka didn't play that many more than Kawhi, which, okay, fair. But as somebody who put Luka on my MVP ballot and not Kawhi, and as someone who put Luka on the first team All-NBA and not Kawhi, I think it was Sam Amick who raised this point in his piece about the voting, that when it comes to load management, and this is not to punish somebody for load managing, but the idea is that if it's not just injury that kept you out of games and kept your game count down, but actual planned rest, you're actually able to be more effective in the games that you do play.
So you are load management is injury. That is injury.
But he's benefiting from the freshness in the games he does play that the other players who have decided to play or have had to play more games. I think it's a fair thing to weigh in.
Would you rather him? So Kawhi has what has been described. I mean, obviously, I'm not a doctor, as they say, but has been described as a degenerative condition. That this is something that he is going to have to manage for the rest of his career, and that if he pushes on the gas too hard throughout not just the regular season, but when they're playing back to backs, we saw him in the playoffs last year load manage during the games. You could watch during playoff games him be a different player in the first 3 quarters than the fourth quarter. So what he is doing here is very clearly managing an injury. And it's a several year long at this point injury, but that is what he is doing. I don't really like with the Kawhi discussion for people talking about it as rest, because it is such a complicated, intricate, and planned out thing to manage what's going on with his leg.
No,
I think that's the same as Luka missing 3 weeks. Yeah. Like just because it's sprinkled over more time, it's still just dealing with an injury, right?
Not diminishing the seriousness of it, not diminishing necessarily the need for it, just saying that planned rest for whatever reason, injury management, injury prevention, whatever, still has the same result, which is that you are now you have the advantage of being fresher for the games that you do play and playing at a certain level in those games. Whereas the guys who are playing all the back-to-backs, the guys who are playing a full load during the times that they're healthy don't have that benefit. And so it's not about whether or not it's justified or reasonable. It's more about, as you weigh all these things, and I'm one who says all the time with the MVP in particular, being available is important. That's part of your value, the most valuable player. In all NBA, I kind of factored that in a little bit too. Like value is being available is valuable. Not being available, it's not to punish you for being hurt. It's not to punish you for needing load management. It's just to say, but it matters because listen to all those games. The Clippers had a really choppy season because between Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, they never really had their full squad together. Those guys didn't play that many games together. Like all of those things matter.
So you're really a New Yorker now that you're quoting Bill Parcells of the best ability is availability?
There's no way I'm quoting Bill Parcells except potentially by accident.
Isn't Bill Parcells the one who said, "You are what your record says you are"? Right? That's a Bill Parcells quote. The last All NBA thing I'll get, and then we're going to bounce to a couple of other topics. Is I struggle with two things on the third team. Number one, I have Chris Middleton as the third team forward.
That's what I have,
and I thought about kicking him off, moving Tatum to forward and making room for one of those guards that I mentioned, particularly Booker or Lowry or Westbrook. And I decided, you know what? Chris Middleton had an amazing season and the Bucks had an amazing season, and I'm fine with that.
He's on my third team as well at forward.
Me too.
Third team center, I thought was a really interesting debate between Rudy Gobert, Joel Embiid, Bam Adebayo, and then to a lesser extent, Domantas Sabonis. And I wonder if either of you felt that was a difficult choice, or was it an easy one for you?
I badly wanted to put Bam Adebayo on the All-NBA team somewhere, and I did not. Rudy Gobert was my third team center. A little bit of this was, and this is maybe not completely fair. There was a little bit of this was the do the Heat deserve two guys? There's only 15 of these slots, and so when you have two guys off of one team, they better damn well be
the Bucks, basically.
Some of the most dominant players in the NBA, right? LeBron and AD, no brainer.
Giannis and Chris.
If Paul George had been healthy and had a Paul George season, right? But yeah, I couldn't quite justify. And Bam was amazing, and I think his time will come. But I do think that Rudy Gobert still earned that spot.
I also, when I'm going to hair-splitting tiebreakers, and this is not my primary decision maker, but when you really are getting down to sort of, okay, well, what can differentiate guys who equally have strong resumes? I think there is a body of work issue here, too, that sort of who this player is when you go out and the ball goes up in the air and who the other guys on the other side think they're facing. You know, the body of work of Rudy Gobert, Bam isn't there yet, and he will be, to your point. I mean, that's kind of Luka Doncic is on my second team, not my first team. I am 100% sure that next year Luka Doncic will be on my first team. I just think these guys' time is coming. They're on the ballot, or they're there, and that if you have to make a tiebreaker of a tiebreaker of a tiebreaker, body of work is an okay place to do it.
Sure.
I voted for Rudy Gobert, and it was a hard decision, but I think I love Bam. I think
the Bam wagon.
Bam's defense. I think I drove the Bam wagon in my Canadian tuxedo. I think
great story, by the way, Zach.
I think Bam's. Stop it. I think the public excitement about Bam's defense is maybe like 10% ahead of where it actually is. I think Bam's really good. He's not quite like unbelievable yet, and I also think the kind of player Gobert is clearly going out of style in the NBA. There are going to be fewer of them, and I think that has somehow resulted in Gobert becoming a little underrated. Like, that guy is a generational defensive player still. He averages 16 a game, and I also, like, the difference obviously is passing, right? Like, Bam averages about 5 assists a game. Rudy's at 1.7. You look at Rudy's context. Number one, the Jazz exchanged defense for shooting when they got Bogdanovich, and so now Rudy has to do almost everything for that team defensively. Like, Mike Conley took a big step back defensively. Like, you could argue they don't have another plus defender in their starting lineup around Gobert. Number two, they don't need Gobert to pass at all from the elbows, even if he can, and I think he can a little bit, because they have a million really good pick and roll ball handlers, whereas the Heat start like one in Jimmy Butler, and so they need Bam's passing. And you wonder, like, if Rudy Gobert averaged 2.8 assists per game, is this even a debate, right? If it's just like one more assist, is it even a debate? And obviously, superseding all of this, is that Joel Embiid is by far the best player of this entire group, and yet played 1,200 minutes in 45 games or 44 games, loafed his way through a certain portion of those minutes. And I'm very disappointed because I love Joel Embiid and he could be the best player in the NBA, but none of us voted him all NBA, which is absolutely crazy. Okay.
But wasn't that partly, and I won't keep you long on this, but you and I, Zach, both interviewed Joel Embiid on the opening day of training camp, which at this point feels like 10 years ago. He said on that day, and I'm sure he said it to you too, that he was going to play less this year because he was so insistent on putting on the gas in the previous season to prove that he wasn't injury prone, that he ended up being injury prone by the time he got to the playoffs, and that he was specifically going to give a little less during the regular season. And I think we saw that, but I would say that you could maybe categorize it less as loafing and more as, hey, there was a bit of a plan.
Maybe. Loafing is the wrong word. The word I use in my column is sulking. And because there definitely was a 15 to 20 game period where the Sixers just were not right.
Yes.
And Joel Embiid just was not right. Yep. And you could see it on the floor. The spirit of the team just was not right. And I'm obsessed with the Sixers. And the reason above all else that I'm obsessed with the Sixers is I really do believe that Joel Embiid could be the best player in the NBA. Full stop, period. That he is that good. I would be derelict in my duties with Howard Beck present. Longtime Knicks scribe, grizzled, ink-stained wretch of the Knicks beat.
I'm grizzled, baby.
We'll start with you. What was your reaction to seeing them hire a coach who's even more grizzled and grumpy than you? And you're not actually grumpy, Mr. Tom Thibodeau. What is your reaction?
I jotted down a couple notes before we did this, and the first four words I wrote.
Great. I'm sorry to make you prepare. You jotted down a couple of notes. Whoa.
I didn't mean it was a massive effort. I just no.
I thought about it for a couple seconds before I came on the podcast.
Zach, are you on beer too? By the way,
no,
that's what it's feeling like.
No,
dude.
If you want me to filibuster for the next 15 minutes on the Knicks, I can. I don't think you want that. Nobody wants that. I wrote down 4 words: process bad, outcome okay.
That's fantastic.
And this is what I mean.
Did you file that to Bleacher Report?
Filed to Bleacher Report.
It's already gotten 25,000 hits. Outcome okay because look, he's Tom Thibodeau. We know Tibbs' his record, his track record. There are any number of ways to spin or parse his record in Minnesota and Chicago, and people can have at that. I don't necessarily want to get into the whole Tibbs phenomenon, but what I will say is, okay, Tibbs is a good coach. He's an established coach. He's a name, and Knicks fans will be happy. I think most of them will be happy about him and all that. That's fine. They didn't hire a bad coach. I don't know that they hired a coach who's going to transform them overnight. I also don't know that coach exists. Process bad, here's why. I don't think they hired Tom Thibodeau because of what he did in Chicago or because of what he did or did not do in Minnesota, and that's certainly a checkered outcome there. I think they hired him because he's Tom Thibodeau. I think the Knicks did what the Knicks always do. They hired a name, and kudos to them for going through a process where they interviewed like a dozen people, including some up and coming assistants and guys like Kenny Atkinson, who's he's had one head coaching job, but he's a great development guy, and I think Kenny actually would have been a great fit for the Knicks right now.
I think I have to drink anytime you call Kenny Atkinson a development guy. Anytime anyone calls him a development guy, I have to drink.
Totally fair. But I think that in hiring Leon Rose, in bringing in Worldwide Wes, in hiring Tibbs, the Knicks are using the same playbook that they've been using for 20 years, which is we're trying to find a path to, one, making the fans feel good about what we're doing, winning the day, winning the headline, winning the back pages of the tabs, winning the press conference, and 2, a path to superstars, right? Well, Leon Rose, he's never run a team before, but he's a super agent who has contacts and rapport with all these high-powered stars. And Worldwide Wes is known for having relationships with all these stars. And Tibbs has coached stars, and Tibbs was with CAA, and those guys are CAA. Like it feels like this is the same Knicks playbook where it's about how do we get to the stars instead of the more fundamental, let's build a solid, sustainable winning basketball culture and front office. And then once we are good and respectable and have built the right way, guys will want to be here. They're looking at the end point again and the outcome instead of the process. And they always do this. And so I have no beef with them hiring Tibbs, but I don't know that they did it for the right reasons. I also think that, frankly, this team has so little talent, so little frontline talent, that it's going to be years before they're respectable. And hiring Tibbs signals, not so subtly, we think we can win soon. And because he's a winning coach, he's the guy you hire when you're ready to win. He's not the guy you hire to bring along a bunch of guys for 2-3 years while you're rebuilding. And by the way, they're rebuilding. That's a generous description. So
well, that's what I mean. To me, the most interesting thing is what they do in the offseason, because Tibbs gets exactly what you just said is thrown to Tibbs all the time. He's a win now guy. He's not going to play the young guys. He doesn't want to play rookies, all that. Well, the front office doesn't have to give him a choice. They can sign nobody. They can decline their non-guaranteed. They can decline what are effectively team options on veteran players.
By the way, signing nobody might not be up to the front office.
Well, I mean, what I mean is it's a similar thing with Michael Porter Jr. in Denver. Yes. The front office forced Mike Malone to play Michael Porter Jr. by trading everybody in front of him. You can give Tibbs a team of young players and just say, this is who you have. Too bad. Play them. Mm-hmm. And the Knicks can do that if they want. And they gave him a 5-year contract, which suggests to me they're going to give him time, or they're willing to give him time to do that. And to me, the Knicks are going nowhere until they figure out who their point guard is, until they have a real point guard on their team. And that's why I thought the missed opportunity, everybody laughed at them for signing 17 power forwards last summer and a couple of centers just for kicks. And the plan B that I thought they should have taken, and I said this at the time, was I thought Malcolm Brogdon would have been perfect for them. And they just need someone who can get them into their offense and organize things on offense. And they have not had that really since the year they won 54 games. And until they solve that problem, I mean, I care who their coach is. I think Tibbs is a good coach. Everybody looks at the Minnesota thing as a bust, and it went bust. It went bust because Jimmy Butler didn't like the other young players. That trade, they could have had, if that doesn't go haywire, yeah, Jimmy Butler is, 6 years older than Karl Anthony Towns. That's not ideal. You want your stars to be about the same age, whatever. But, he's still younger than him. Maybe not 6 years older, probably a little less than that. They still could have had a nice 3 or 4 year window of really, really good teams. And the question of whether Tibbs' defense, and that was the story of Minnesota, his defense, this defensive genius, the guy who reinvented NBA defense, well, it didn't work anymore in Minnesota. Was that because and all the shot selection stuff they accomplished in Chicago, never allowing any threes, never allowing any shots at the rim, no corner threes, all that didn't happen in Minnesota. Was that because A, the personnel was bad, or B, the league has figured out that defense? And Kevin Pelton wrote about how Tibbs has kind of tweaked his style a little bit. But in Mitchell Robinson, Tibbs has a really, really interesting guy to try to mold into the kind of anchor he has never had on any of his teams. I mean, even KG wasn't like that. KG was better. KG's maybe the best defensive player of all time. Let me be clear. But he was never that tall and that hoppy and all that stuff. I'm interested to see it. I think Tibbs is a good coach. I think it can work. But I think what they do in terms of adding talent to the team is more interesting.
I mean, to me, the Minnesota experience and how we're talking about Tibbs, since that was, of course, his most recent job, a lot of people are sort of missing the point. Minnesota is a condemnation of Tibbs as a personnel person. It is saying, you know what? Probably shouldn't be running a front office, or at least shouldn't be doing it while he is also coaching.
I mean, kind of.
No, because, and I don't mean that trade, which I agree with you, was good for them. The Jimmy Butler problem was not a coaching problem. The reason why Jimmy and Tibbs fell out was over the management of his contract and the money that he gave to other players, and sort of told Jimmy, wait your turn. And he just didn't bank right on managing Jimmy, that he thought that Jimmy would just sort of wait in the wings while players that Jimmy felt were younger and not as dedicated and not as good at him were getting these huge packages of contracts. And he was told, wait. So I think that some of the decisions that got made there, whether it's Jimmy or 1,000 other smaller decisions, and even once Jimmy was upset, how all of that was handled, is a condemnation on, hey, either Tibbs shouldn't be running front office or he shouldn't be doing it while it was a coach. And not to bring up Bill Parcells for the third time, right? Wasn't he the one who said, I want to run the team because if you ask me to cook the meal, I want to buy the groceries? I think that in football, that probably there is ways that makes sense. But in basketball, with 82 games and all that basketball coaches have to do, I am happy that in the sport right now, we just don't really have the president and coach thing, except outside of San Antonio, where, let's be honest, R.C. Buford takes such a strong role in managing the front office. Pop's title is more to do with just overall steering the franchise. I just think when we talk about Tibbs and you talk about him as a coach and he's going to coach this New York Knicks team, I don't know if you can hold Minnesota against him. That is my sort of larger point, that I think the Minnesota experiment going wrong had more to do with him having both of those jobs than it did with his coaching job.
No, I will say this. If we're going to say that Tibbs' defensive reputation, his reputation as defensive genius, is rooted first primarily obviously in the Celtics in the 2008 championship, in which he designed that defense, and then what he did in Chicago, then it's also fair to point this out. In Boston, he had Kevin Garnett as the linchpin of that defensive scheme, and that made it all possible. And in Chicago, he had Joakim Noah, who was absolutely incredible, plus guys like Taj Gibson and Luol Deng and all these guys who were built that way. Like, Tibbs didn't make those guys who they are. And I think one of the unfortunate things about the Bulls narratives during that time was, like, it was all about this Tibbs thing where he created all this. Yeah, like, he set a tone. Yes, he's demanding, and he demands defense and all these things. But he had guys drafted by a front office that he didn't get along with, who sometimes don't get enough credit for the guys they brought in during that time, who were built to play this way and who had incredible intensity and pride and defensive chops. And that mattered. But he got a lot of the credit because he's supposed to be the defensive guru. He goes to Minnesota, and suddenly it's because the players are deficient. Their defense sucks. They're bottom third. And it's because of Towns and Wiggins and the rest of them. And it's their fault. Like, Tibbs can't be the defensive genius who made Chicago what they were because of him and not the players, and then go to Minnesota and have it be, well, now it's not his fault, it's the player. Like, there's a disconnect there in the way that he's discussed. And that's the only thing I would point out. I don't think it's all of one or all of the other. But I think as he goes to the Knicks, which is going to be probably the biggest challenge he's faced, because he doesn't have anybody anywhere near the talent of Karl Anthony Towns, or not even Andrew Wiggins, frankly, that this is a lot bigger task than he has had to face. And Chicago had a lot of talent during his time there. So this is different. I am very, very curious to see, as Zach alluded to, how the offseason goes personnel wise, first and foremost, because that matters more than anything.
Well, and I think your initial point, I think a year later, the Knicks' young core is a little less interesting than it was a year ago. Mitchell Robinson's going to be good and had a good year and is about what we thought. Barrett, whatever, fine. Like, he's okay. I think I like RJ Barrett. I think New York fans are a little too excited about him. He shot horribly from everywhere. He has good feel. Like, I think he's going to be a decent NBA player. Knox was completely lost. Dennis Smith was completely lost. They're young. Maybe they figure it out, but that's another year of looking completely lost that is now in the rear view. And Ntilikina is going to be a rotation player on a good team someday if he sticks in the league. Like, he's that good. He can be, to me, the upside seal. He can be Patrick Beverley someday on a good team. And that's going to sound like an insult. I think his upside is like fifth starter on a good team because he's that good defensively. The idea that he's going to be your lead guard and playmaker, to me, we have seen almost no evidence that that's possible. And so that's why you're going to hear Chris Paul rumors. I would be very interested to see exactly what kind of deal the Knicks could build that would actually interest Oklahoma City because of everything I just said about their young players, being what interest level those players would have on the trade market. And if not Chris Paul, then they got to find somebody to run that offense next year. But it's I think Tibbs is a good coach. I don't really have a lot of problems with the hire. Last thing I want to hit before we switch to Mr. Beck's podcast. Rachel, is the Lou Will thing like the talk of the bubble?
Oh, yes. Yep. Yes. Also, yes. I have had probably 12 conversations with very high level players that are on both of your all NBA lists that we discussed at the beginning of this podcast. And it is pretty much all they want to talk about. So absolutely. And it ranges, right?
What's the tone? What's the tone of those conversations? Look, is it funny, like, haha, Lou is Lou? Or is there some, like, whoa, this is how fragile this thing is?
No, I think there's a number of players who are a little concerned that what they do in their free time would be metered in such a way that I think there's a larger, I don't want to misrepresent, I think there's certainly a larger understanding of the seriousness of this bubble, how fragile it is, how careful everyone has to be. And we are only talking about this now in that context. But in that context, there is some concern from some of these players of, hey, Lou said he went to pick up some wings. And if I have never been to Magic City, gentlemen, I cannot attest to the quality of the wings, but it was noted on the jump earlier today by somebody who maybe would know that the wings there are better than many wings around the Atlanta area. I don't know. I do know that Lou Will has an item on the menu named after him, as you pointed out at the top. And that if he had gone to Wingstop, as Tracy McGrady said on the jump today, would the NBA have looked at it in the same way? And who gets to make that judgment that it's okay if he went and picked up wings at Wingstop, but not okay if he did it at Magic City? And who gets to make the judgment? I think, Zach, you had noted in your piece with Alex Caruso that part of the consideration was the NBA said, hey, to take any like strip club morality out of it, a 100-person wedding that Alex Caruso was considering attending because his sister was getting married, they said that's a high-risk activity. And that if you went out and came back in, I believe you noted that it would be a 10-day quarantine, and that was part of the decision. It could be. And that was part of the decision not to do it. I was just using that example, though, to say that from the NBA's perspective, they're not making a moral judgment on a strip club, which is a legal business in Atlanta.
Absolutely. Nobody should
right.
be.
That they are making the judgment that, hey, once you are engaging in that is considered more of a high-risk activity. And if you do that, even in an excused absence, you need to quarantine for 10 days when you get back. And the player side of it that I have talked to for the past couple of days seems to be some concern over who gets to decide what that is the fact that Magic City, just that name was involved, sort of sway the jury in a way that it maybe shouldn't have. And who kind of gets to decide? I think that they are a little bit concerned that if he tested negative for the days that he was out of the bubble and then tested negative for the 4 days that he would have had to come back, and that would have been mandatory no matter what, they felt that the extra 6 days, again, several of the players I talked to wondered, is that punitive because it happened to be a strip club? And we don't know because we don't know who made the decision.
I don't think so at all. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think it makes it more of a naturally viral story, let's say, that it was a strip club. I don't think the NBA cares. What I think the NBA cares is the second you are photographed at a crowded indoor place, and I haven't even seen the photograph. I have no idea how crowded it is. The second you are photographed there, mask or not, we have now lost any semblance of understanding and control of who you were with, where, how long, and what the environment was like. And if that's the case, this whole thing can come crumbling down so fast. And that's leaving aside the Disney staffer thing, which is still an issue and something that they have really, I think, so far skillfully gotten around. Like, so fast. You come back with it, and your team gets it, and some people in the other teams at your hotel gets it. The whole baseball season is in jeopardy today because it can happen that fast. And so I think the league is fine to make him quarantine for 10 days. I think that's what you signed up for. And it's a very fragile thing. And, I know it sucks and it does feel uncomfortable to have anyone policing people's behavior. And, what is it like when Lou comes back? Like, there's a car waiting for him at the airport. He's escorted, he's treated like a prisoner almost. But if this is going to work, this is just the reality of how this is going to happen. And, I just don't see any other way to do it except for this to be unpleasant for people.
And I would just say this, and I think when I say this, I think this is how the NBA is seeing it too. And Zach, I agree with you, and Rach, I agree with you. I don't think the NBA is punishing him for having been seen and photographed at a strip club. It's not even first of all, it's not a punishment. It is them taking the proper precautions based on the bubble that they've created, all of the things that go along with that, and trying to keep the virus out. If he had been photographed in the middle of a crowded pool hall a crowded McDonald's, a crowded Capitol Grill, a Capitol.
Wow.
A crowded.
See, 2 beers in.
There's the beer.
Howard's on his second beer.
A crowded anything, a crowded Capitol Grill, a crowded whatever. The point is that you're not supposed to be putting yourself at risk. And in what we know about the virus by now, here in late July, is the most risky place to be is indoors in a crowded space where no one's wearing a mask. And especially if it's loud and people are talking and having to yell and you're spitting out more droplets. This is how the virus gets passed. This is how we have super spreading events. This is not a place that Lou Williams or any other player should be when they've left the bubble for purportedly other reasons. And that's the other part of this. It's just optics. I don't think the quarantine has anything to do with the optics, but I'll just say personally, I think it's bad optics to leave for reasons that were obviously much more personal and important. For the death of it was a family member, a friend of the family. That's fine. But like while you're out, be careful while you're out. So to go and put yourself at risk.
By the way, maybe he was because he wore a mask. I don't know how crowded that place was. I don't know how long he stayed there. But the NBA can't know that stuff either. And when they see that photo, that they can interview him and try to reconstruct it. But in a lot of ways, the Clippers are fortunate this is happening now. Like, it's early. He's going to miss 2 seeding games. It doesn't matter. But it should be between this and what's happening in baseball. Look, the NBA took a lot of criticism in the media for when people didn't see those health guidelines as the date approached. They took a lot of criticism for not taking it seriously enough. And I knew what the guidelines were going to look like. And I kept telling people they're doing their homework. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean they're not doing it. And so far, it's working. And even the epidemiologists who are like, I'm not really sure that we should have sports right now, have said the NBA has done an A job constructing a way to do this. And by the way, a lot of those epidemiologists, most of the ones I interviewed, frankly, were like, we as a society have to find a balance between caution and normalcy. And we are rooting for sports to come back. I didn't say that. People at like Harvard and the Fred Hutchinson Center for Cancer Research said that. And so far it's working. And that is a feather in the NBA's cap, but it's so fragile. It's so fragile. And it just takes one slip up for it to all go out the window.
Well, I would say that part of the discussion that the players are having inside the bubble is part of our national discussion, right? Where does personal liberty start and your obligation to the group start and all of that, those kinds of things. And I think in this country, we have put such an emphasis on personal liberty for a long time. For a lot of good and in a lot of really amazing ways. And that in a crisis, whether it is a World War II situation or whether it is a coronavirus pandemic situation, sometimes the good of the group sort of becomes more to the fore. That has happened historically in this country over and over again. And we are in one of those periods now. We're in one of those periods when you absolutely should be wearing a mask when you go to the grocery store, and that these guys maybe have to be a little bit more cautious. My parting words to all of these players when I have had these discussions with them is that they should be ordering in, and whether that is wings from a restaurant or maybe a lady of the evening, you just order in, and then you are not in a crowded place. That's all I have to say.
And by the way,
see, Zach's going to just blow right by that, Howard.
Right by it. The players voted for this. And because a lot of that same criticism of the NBA was, well, they're making the players do this. This is unfair to the players. They're putting the players in an unsafe situation. And I never totally bought that argument. And I've said it before on this podcast. Number one, I said weeks ago, I'm not convinced that the bubble is less safe than the real world. And in fact, now I'm convinced that the bubble is more safe than the real world. And number two, the players voted for this. The players are not some, passive recipients of NBA policy forced to do this by the puppet masters. Now, the threat of the CBA being ripped apart and what that would mean for the players was indeed looming all over this. Maybe that affected them, but I think the players want to play. A lot of the players want to play, and they voted to go play. And I think the Lou Williams thing, I agree it raises some uncomfortable issues, but what it should really, my takeaway was, A, is this going to affect the Clippers' chemistry? And after talking to people around the Clippers, I don't think it will. And B, this should be looked at as, wow, this is how fast it could all come apart. Because this could be over in 10 days if the virus comes in. It could be over, the whole thing. So anyway, we will continue this on the full 48 with Howard Beck. Rachel and Howard, I really... I really love doing this in Vegas. It's become one of my favorite things. Vegas is my favorite trip of the year. It's good to see your faces. It's good to drink a little bit. Let's continue that in a few minutes on Howard's podcast. But it's good to see you both.
Absolutely.
You too.